Oh my gosh, boys. My mental health has been so good recently.
Do I need to get my bleep finger ready?
You are
Oh
my
my
best
God.
friend.
Oh my God.
It is very juicy.
It is very juicy. I love you, my friend. Kentucky Fried Chicken. Oh my God, I fucking love Albanians. Yes, everybody listening, this is indeed not a KFC ad. This is an Albanians ad. Google, it will make your day. We're gonna play it in the beginning.
I'll put it in. Yeah, I'll put it in the edit.
Thank you, USA, for Kentucky Burger.
It is very juicy.
It melts in your hands.
Thank you, KFC, for Burger Kentucky.
It's with mozzarella. It's very crunchy.
Thank you, USA, for Kentucky Burger. It is big and heavy. It is the legend.
My favorite thing about this entire meme was I wrote to the boys in our special private little group, and I told them I can't take this country seriously. Diego replies with country in quotation marks.
Oh, come on. You don't gotta put me in the limelight like this, bro.
Oh, it's okay. Dude,
I'm gonna start saying the shit you say about fucking Kurds, bro. Okay, swear to God.
You see, I'm invincible. You guys can't cancel me for anything.
it's very,
I've said all my racist stuff on air.
You're born canceled. You're white. Sympathy canceled. Canceled a normal fucking skin tone on you.
JT does pronounces hard R on rap songs, even when they don't use a hard R. I don't get it.
I don't think they say it there.
Sometimes he ad-libs them too. Just
JT underdeveloped
fly
looking ass
me
character.
to the moon.
Oh God. Sinatra.
No, he just throw them in wherever. He doesn't do this shit. He's a good boy.
I would bet my life that Sinatra was a fan of the slurs.
Wow, absolutely.
But he's Italian. Speaking of Italians, I started watching Sopranos.
Fucking finally.
I know. I got the theme song stuck in my head. Woke up this morning, had some gabagool, did some other stuff, had some more gabagool.
Innocent.
That's how it goes, right?
You're so innocent. Oh my God. You're going to be quoting, like, this is going to be as formative of a period for your life as your childhood was, because 30 to 50% of all media references that you're going to be throwing out there for the rest of your life after you finish the last season are all going to be Sopranos related, okay?
Damn.
He was an interior decorator, okay? Stop like this.
Czechoslovakian.
Damn, I wish Italians were real.
His house looked like shit.
Oh, that's so fucking
one
funny.
of the greatest fucking pieces of media ever made. Hakeem, have you watched it? You're not a big watcher guy. I don't think you can sit down for anything longer than an hour and a half. This man, when we hung out, this man would literally speed through a fucking movie.
Can we put this Criterion film on 2X?
Yeah. No, I will watch very long movies, for like 4-hour epics and whatnot. That I will watch, and like real movies. I don't mean fucking Marvel garbage. But I
slow down there, Chief. Holy shit!
No,
went and offended 90% of humans ever.
You say that, but I know so many people who are like, "Oh no, I love Superman versus Batman. Who's gonna go the fastest?"
That's what I meant. We just lost half of our patrons. Okay.
Oh, I thought you meant 90% of people don't. Yeah.
No, they do. I don't understand why, but hey, yeah.
But I was gonna say, yes, I'm one of those people who, if I'm left to my own devices, I will watch a movie on 2 times speed. I know the music, the time. I don't give a fuck. All right, I'm here to absorb the information. Look, very few things I do in my life.
I don't like you. You're a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
What the fuck? If I could, I would watch a movie on 2X. Seriously, like, why do I love you so much? It makes absolutely no fucking sense.
You should see that. You know when I do the scrubbing of the editing of videos, or when I like proof watch them, I watch them on 6-8 times speed.
How do you do that?
I remember. I know what I say, so it's just like
I do as well.
Well, yeah, I'll do it on like 2, whatever the Premiere default is when you press L on the keyboard, then it goes faster. I can do 1 click. I can't do 2. That's nuts. You guys are so talented.
When that extension that I had for Firefox broke, the one that allowed me to speed up to like as much as I want, I used to be watching videos on 4 times speed. I fucking, oh my god.
Hyper consume.
Yeah,
Hyper
just,
consume.
like, yeah. And no, it's like sometimes there's something like that's an hour and a half that I want to watch, or a fucking 3-hour lecture. I don't want to sit here and waste 3 hours of my time if I can get the information in 45 minutes.
Yeah, if it's raw information, like if it's just some dude talking, then yeah, you speed it up. But if it's like an aesthetic vlog or something, dude, with some music, some lo-fi beats in the background, I'm not gonna speed that up.
I want it deep fried.
Yeah, you don't deep fry it or speed it up. The type of video that JT mentioned, you just don't watch videos like that. Because what the fuck?
Yeah, true.
Do something with your life.
Right.
Speaking of
Touch
doing
grass.
something with your life, like as always, shout out to the patrons, thank you, and so on.
Of course, always.
Thanks to you guys. We don't do ads, but I just watched this cool guy. Shout out, I don't remember his name. I should check it out. Pretty cool guy. I think he's lefty or whatever the fuck on YouTube. And he showed me this. We all have to buy this.
What is it?
And especially because it's not going to hurt, I guess, the program revenue. But I guess the other stuff it might hurt. I do not care. It's a chip that you put into your router, and all of your devices at home don't play ads. It sounds like magic.
Really?
Yeah.
Sounds like magic. What the fuck?
It sounds like it's gonna slurp your data. It sounds like a keylogger with extra steps.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
But if it's legit, I'm okay
We
with
want
that.
our entire lefty audience to submit
What-
their first
what
and last
makes it
names,
lit-
as well
what-
as their social security numbers.
What makes it but okay, like YouTube takes that data as well. Facebook takes that data. Instagram takes that data.
I don't know. It just seems more intrusive when you're putting it into the hardware, into your, I don't know, like physically into your network. But I ain't no tech guy. Believe it or not.
That's just the router. Like,
I don't know what a router is. I don't know what goes on in there. That's where it stores my copy pastes and shit.
It's like, I love it. I was gonna say completely unrelated, but related to JT, not being an IT guy. I saw a secondhand store thing that sold happened to have camera stuff, and one of them was these nice like lens that look like Coke cans. I don't know what kind of fucking lens, but one of those lens. And the person wrote the price on when you remove the cap and you have the big lens. He wrote the price on the lens.
On the element? On the glass. What a fucking... Oh, I'm going to get bleeped for this, man. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
In like Sharpie. Surely it's like dry erase or something.
Mark, I didn't try to erase it. I lightly tapped at it and it didn't smudge. So.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't know what you do. You just get rubbing alcohol and just go to town.
That person will not see the pearly gates. What the hell?
I should have gone the thing. Imagine if it was some like holy relic of camera guys.
Probably. You should have sent me a picture. I would have melted down.
No, I knew. You have a newborn on the way. I don't want you to
off myself.
JT has never been suicidal. He has never had any ideally. Oh, astaghfirullah. Like, dude, you have so much to live for. You have the end of Israel to live for.
True.
Yeah.
Kind of. That's carrying me. I'm kind of afraid. Like today's episode is an awesome topic, but I'm kind of afraid. If Israel goes away, what do I have to live for? Like,
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Deprogram.
Hello.
Today is episode 187, and the title
88.
is...
Jesus.
88.
I didn't say it this time. I didn't say
188.
it.
I'm editing the doc. It's 188. All right, mafhum. We have received the information. Yes.
The audience probably thinks this is a bit. This is not a bit. I just work with some of the smartest, wisest, kindest, funniest people on planet Earth
Idiots,
that also happen
idiots.
to be fucking idiots. Okay?
Herding cats over here, this guy. I don't know how he manages, but he does. Dude, we have...
No. They're not. They're brilliant. Please.
We have a nightmare of pulling together our schedules over the next couple of weeks for
Yeah.
many reasons. And you got me... Bless Hugo. Ya Allah, bless this man. The way that he just magically...
Color-coded calendar.
Yeah,
bro.
he magically brought up this beautiful, dude...
I just sound like a nerd now. I'm gonna kill myself.
No, but your calling is this, you're a
Yeah.
supreme fucking organizer. It's beautiful to see, right? He
General
deserves all the
Secretary.
praise.
The
Yeah,
people's
absolutely.
secretary. Yeah.
Everybody give him many little picks. Hugo is genuinely hurting cats over here. We love him, and we appreciate all his efforts. It is episode 188. It feels
Yes,
a bit
sir.
weird to have 88 in the fucking thing. That's completely unintentional.
Yeah, un poco suicide.
Yeah, that was not
Oh
intentional.
my God! And we're talking about Israel. Yeah,
Yeah.
good job, guys. That was a
I
great
said
fucking
187.
You
I
said
thought it was
188. There you go.
Maybe Hugo's too good at this. Oh my god! All right.
Continue.
The episode title is "How Will Israel Fall?" By the way, I've been watching so much Al Jazeera, like the breaking news, the clicker noise. The
Yeah.
dun, 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 dun. It's just fucking in my head the entire. I love it. I low-key love it. I was telling JT before that I love being a boomer Arab dad at 2 a.m, staring just in a t-shirt at the news. Anyways, today we'll discuss the various scenarios that Israel will encounter towards its end. We'll cover diplomatic, economic, as well as military outcomes or potentialities. That doesn't mean that this is the way that it's going to happen. These are just tendencies of development that can occur based on the general context around Israel and what could possibly happen geostrategically,
flags,
geopolitically, and whatnot. The question is, by the way, not if Israel is going to fall. Israel will fall like every monocentric colony. And it's the question is how and when. It's not an if. That's why we're going to kind of try to give people a little bit of an overview, let's say. Well, I'll begin with my section first, which is the section on the military defeat of Israel. First and foremost, it is the least likely scenario. Now, guys, you're probably asking me, why? Why is it the least likely scenario? Is it because Israel is this all-powerful nation that can do whatever it wants? No, it's just geographic limitations. That's first and foremost one of the reasons. But also the second, much larger reason you could say is
the sperm cannons.
Exactly right. the sperm retrieval squads. They're unparalleled.
Yeah.
The best of the craft. They
Motherfucker literally watch Warhammer too much because don't they clone the space marines or whatever?
I know, fuck it. Yeah, for the live the 10,000 years or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, they watch the worst parts of fascist media and be like, you know what, we like that. We think this is something that would suit our sort of colony well. Anyways, the second thing, which is much more important, is the continuous American support. JT's tax dollars are directly funding everything that's
Happy to help.
Oh my
I'm
God.
doing my part.
Yeah, exactly right. That's what I was gonna say. But yeah, Israeli society and the Israeli military are highly fragile. The reason is because they have no land with which they can absorb any sort of invasion that comes into the country. You can compare this with Iran or with Russia, for example. Nations that have large land masses where they can absorb primary or like the preliminary military buildup as well as infantry movement, mobilized or otherwise, into their countries and then set up a defense. Israel is not a very big country whatsoever. It's long and narrow, so it's very easy to cut off north from south and different segments from each other. So they can't rely on any sort of armed invasion as a potential outcome that they'll be able to defend against. Iran is different, for example. Iran has a very deep interior, highly mountainous terrain, so on and so forth. It would be a nightmare to invade. Afghanistan is the same, by the way. Not a very large country, but the terrain as well as the general size of the country, density of populations, where the roads are and so on and so forth, makes it incredibly difficult to occupy. The United States lived this experience and failed many times over in their attempt to occupy Afghanistan, and many other nations before it had fallen into the same pit, basically. The Afghani government itself has difficulty. So yeah, these are the comparisons that I'm just trying to draw. Israel, on the other hand, is like Lebanon. It's very difficult to absorb an invasion, and that's why historically invasions aren't very sustained in these areas, but particularly Israel. Moreover, though, because they have such little reserve, right? The only thing they can rely on is their illegal and undeclared nuclear weapons as the trump card in any such situation. If somebody were to mobilize and then actively penetrate into Israeli lines, then move into the country with the armed invasion, that's why that's when they'd let off the nukes. Of course, because, as mentioned before, the actual viability of the state immediately crumbles because there would be no longer a state. Then the nation would get cut up into small pieces in a successful armed offensive, against the country. More importantly, though, And this, by the way, again, I need to keep reiterating, this is the least likely scenario. Again, not because Israel is some sort of powerful, hyper-competent power or something like that. It's because of other limitations. I'm going to get to geographic limitations. And specifically the continuous American support that they will always get to a very far extent. But there is a breaking point on this, and I'm going to get to it in a second. The nature of war with Israel mostly is an air war, that they fight against other people and other people will fight against them. Like Iran is sending missiles towards Israel. Israel fires missiles at everybody else. But an actual armed incursion into Israel has not happened for many, many years. This is for several reasons. Before we get to that, how are wars with settler colonies won, just in general? If you look at all the history of it, it is with military presence, either in the settler colony or a threat of military presence in the settler colony, right? As a result of this, they usually will acquiesce to diplomatic or otherwise other sort of agreements that would cease hostilities before a viable military incursion could occur. This is the perfect encapsulation of this is South Africa and Angola with the MPLA and the support of the Cubans. South Africa was decisively defeated at several battles, and then as a result of this kind of pushed the diplomatic side of things further. Israel would possibly, if their nukes were either disarmed or there was a sensible, and this is, by the way, I'm talking in the realm of fiction, a sensible Israeli leadership where they would not use nukes, then that would be the other outcome that could happen. But regardless, settler colonies generally are defeated when there is military presence in the settler colony, an armed incursion that manages to get into the nation, or a significant threat of a successful one. Why is this generally so for settler colonies? Why are settler colonies defeated in this way? Because settlers leave. They won't be privileged in this settler colony anymore, and as a result, they will decide to go back to essentially where they came from. And I don't mean every single person from the nation. I mean a significant enough proportion, like double-digit percentages, which would result in a loss of the viability of the state. And the people who would leave, the people most likely to emigrate, are the people who have the economic means, have the education, and have the connections and passports and whatnot. That means the entirety, for example, in the case of Israel, the entirety of the highly educated echelon, all the engineers and doctors, anybody who held any sort of prominent political position, and so on and so forth. Most administrative and bureaucratic staff that have access to the vast majority of the state, essentially, will leave. And what you end up having is more like, working, quote unquote, working class Israelis, as if there is such a thing. You know what I mean. There is a class dynamic within Israel, but the primary contradiction is not the class dynamic in Israel, it's between the settlers and the Palestinians. But regardless, there's some people who, I'll call them what they are, they're idiots, who think that, it's coping that Israelis will leave. This is because they think Israelis are like Americans, where they are like 12th generation or what the fuck. That's a great exaggeration, but you know what I mean. They're like 6th generation in the States, right? They have nowhere else to go, and the countries they left are probably, most of them don't even exist, at least in the same political structure. They have no actual connection, paperwork trail and whatnot. They were entirely different systems. They were monarchies, and now they're quote unquote democracies or whatever. But most Israelis have a clear connection to a country one of their ancestors came from, and I mean like a father or a grandfather or a great grandfather, like not that many generations between them. And double-digit percentages of Israel's current population are people who either came to Israel within the past 30 years. Or were born in Israel to people who came to Israel within the past 50, 55, 60 years, right? That means the vast majority of these people have direct connections, usually passports, to Poland or Russia or the United States or wherever else, or they can very easily get one because through one or both of their parents, they have legal right to have passports. That's why when you see sometimes images of, I find it very funny, whenever you see anything about Ben Gurion Airport and Israelis leaving, for whatever, every time something happens and they flood the airports, you see people holding several passports. One person, and they're holding several different nation passports. Why? This is the only country in the world where you see this on such a wide scale. That's because it's a
10% of the Israeli citizens own multiple passports, aka have dual citizenship,
if not more than dual.
Which makes migration quite literally just getting on the plane and getting out of the country. Completely changes the whole economy. And on top of that, as Hakim said, it's not just spiritual connection or sort of genetic connection to your ancestors. Most European countries have very strict regulations when it comes to who gets to get a passport based on pretty much lineage, if we want to call it that.
Yeah.
So even if you have, I think it goes up to great-great-grandpa that used to be a national of a particular republic, you will immediately get a permanent residency, and then after 3 to 5 years, you will also get a citizenship. The reason I'm mentioning all of this is because it's, another red flag to call it that, a perfect cocktail to minimize the number of problems an Israeli might need to experience if he was, not from Israel when it comes to migrating out, right? Basically, it's. I would argue the number one place on planet Earth for which it is, on average, for most citizens, the easiest to leave. Which combined with, fucking grenades being chucked and bombs falling around you is to not be funny, but deadly cocktail, right?
Yeah. I was going to say an interesting point also about this access to dual citizenships and whatnot. I know a Turkish guy. If you don't know, Portugal and Spain during the Reconquista, as they call it, where they expelled their Muslim and Jewish populations from Spain and Portugal. Portugal has since decided that this was a mistake, but only to do this to the Jewish population, funnily enough. So if you can prove that you have Jewish ancestry tied to the expulsions that happened, then you can get Portuguese citizenship, right? This is done through certain last names and whatnot. There's certain paper trails and other forms. There are ways of finding this out. Regardless, I know a Turkish guy who his great grandmother was Jewish, and she was of the lineage and descendants of the people who were expelled from one of the Jews of Portugal at the time, who was expelled, and then the Ottomans sent their fleet and they took both Muslims and Jews and brought them to the Ottoman Empire at the time. This guy's great-grandmother was descendant of these people, these Jews that had come. And they had thoroughly assimilated into Turkish culture and whatnot at that point. I believe even her or her family had converted to Islam at that point. And he has, as a result of her being a descendant, his great-grandmother being a descendant of these people, he has a Portuguese passport.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying. By the way, anybody who can trace their lineage, who is Muslim, by the way, cannot do this. Funnily enough, I'll let you fill in the blanks as to why you think that is. But yeah. Anyways, moving aside from this, there's a few details that just to highlight. There are limited options for any side in a or the two sides that we're currently discussing right now would be Iran and Israel. Because they're the ones who are currently at war, or at least Israel has started a unprovoked war through vast terrorism and illegal action that is condemned by international law, but apparently international law only applies to Ukraine and not to Iran or Palestine. And the Iranians are just defending themselves as any nation should have apparently the right to. Regardless. Between these two nations, they both have highly limited options for them to mobilize any sort of infantry because of the geographic distance. Simple enough. There are several countries between Israel and Iran. This works in Israeli favor, in fact, because they don't have the population to sustain any meaningful occupation. Number one, that's first and foremost. Nor do they have, as I mentioned, the land to absorb an invasion from Iran. Hypothetically, let's say that that Iran bordered Israel, and let's say hypothetically that the Israelis managed to penetrate into Iran and then occupy some cities or a third of Iran or something. Iran is a huge nation with a huge population, 85 million people or something like that. The Israeli Jewish population is 6 million or 7 million. That's discounting the Arab Israelis and also the other Palestinians who are in the modern day Israel. The amount of troops that you need to occupy even a mid-sized city are in the hundreds of thousands to properly occupy and maintain control over. There are cities in Iran, single cities that have a larger population than all of Israel. And so this is the thing why I'm saying it works in their favor, because that means that they don't ever have to invest in these this concept of warfare, that they would have to move forward and then occupy large swaths of land and whatnot, like the United States has to do sometimes, or even Russia to a lesser extent, which, as I mentioned, works in Israeli favor. That's why when they talk about, for example, the Greater Israel Project and whatnot, it does a lot of circle jerking. They do believe in it. They do want to do it. But the reality of them trying to accomplish it is far more farcical. It would be done under the guise of a weird, like, American actual, where Americans go and die and fight and occupy, but the de jure, like, control, the de facto control is by Israel, if this would even ever come to pass, which is of very little likelihood.
I love the TikTok memes that have been popping off really hardcore. Get ready, boys, and then rock music playing in the background. We're all gonna die for Israel. And shots of just them in trenches and shit, or like the Family Guy shots where a guy is basically running around in Counter-Strike, holding an AR in one hand and holding a phone, watching Family Guy memes in his left hand, and it just says above it, "Your 2035, your kid in Iranian trenches." We gotta feed that.
As you think you'll get that far, my God.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. It's always like, the Battle of Shanghai, 2032. It's like, motherfucker, it's going to be the Battle of Miami is what it's going to be. Anyways, let's expand a little bit on the idea, on the thing, or the concept that Israel wouldn't be able to sustain any sort of occupation. How do we know this? Well, the West Bank and Gaza are a perfect example. Gaza is the most besieged area possibly in history, in the way that it's been besieged for such a prolonged period of time in such a clear and systematic way. Like, even besieged towns, medieval towns, still had land that they could cultivate within the besieged walls, right? But the Israelis bomb everything in Gaza from the sky into smithereens and try to occupy and whatnot. Despite the fact that they have had full and complete total military superiority, they're fed a constant, basically a barrage of everything they need from the United States, up into all forms of intelligence as well. And they cannot fully occupy Gaza. They can't even penetrate into the various areas where there are built-up resistance units. Every time they go in there, they get smoked and then they retreat out of it. So the only thing they can do is just kind of force the population to go up and north and south and north and south and north and south again, in this prolonged circus of genocide that they're very proud of. But if an area the size of the city of Boston or something, Gaza is a very small area geographically. If they can't occupy this, you think they can occupy, I don't know, Damascus or any other much larger built-up urban center? No, they can't. But that's the greatest evidence. By the way, the West Bank is also, they have complete impunity. They can do whatever the fuck they want. And they can't control the entire area, swaths of the West Bank. They try their darndest. They rip up the roads. They go in and raid and kill people and arrest people, kidnap people in the dead of night and all that. And it doesn't, they've been doing this for decades. It's never gotten them anywhere, really. That's just the evidence, let's say. Moreover, and this is also keeping in mind that Hamas and the other Palestinian resistance factions are also cut off from the rest of the world. For the most part, are under siege. They have indigenous capabilities within Gaza, of course, but this is not like, for example, being behind enemy lines where there could be proper partisan type activity, guerrilla activity, and whatnot that would then support a sort of home front against Israeli occupation. My point being that I'm trying to kind of drive home is the Israelis cannot occupy anybody. Really, they can barely occupy the land that they're sitting on without it blowing up in their face every couple of years.
That's why they love regime change so much, if they can do it, which, obviously the Iranians saw coming, have been seeing coming for half a fucking century, and have properly adapted to. I mean, I don't know, I can't imagine a more well-developed, inside obviously of the confines of what is it now, fucking 30 years of sanctions, but a more developed intelligence apparatus and a very tough fucking domestic military and police force that makes sure that absolutely no potential foreign agitators can infiltrate the country and try to do something like this. That's why, these motherfuckers be hitting absolutely everything in order to hopefully, from their perspective, introduce mass panic, mass revolt against the leadership, etc., etc., etc. That and obviously the nuclear program. This is cliche shit everybody knows. But I just wanted to mention it's they know, and what Hakeem is talking about is exceptionally important. They absolutely know they cannot occupy a particular territory. They absolutely know that even from their big brother over in fucking Yankee land, the kind of the patience for sometimes Israeli adventurism is being cut shorter and shorter, and that they need to destabilize every single fucking neighbor, direct or indirect, that they have in order to be able to not survive indefinitely, but postpone the inevitable collapse of the said settler colony, because this is not about ethics or morality or whatever the fuck. Just settler colonies are a idiotic way to organize a fucking country, and eventually the contradictions eat it.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Sorry for the rant.
No, absolutely. Beautifully said. One minor correction, though, it's that inside Iran there have been like American intelligence rings and whatnot, and also ones connected to Mossad, that have been successful in like this terrorist actions and whatnot. But that's basically all they've managed to do, which I find very funny that Israel is so proud of. By the way, the Israelis did none of it. It's all American intelligence. But they're so proud of it, and they're like, oh, this has been in the works for 25 years. I'm like, the best you could do is set up a band of like 30 guys that make like these homemade drones and that burn tires. This is the best that you could have done. Of course, they have the Americans have had good intelligence about, for example, when the assassinations happened. But that's not really difficult to do when you've been monitoring a country for every single second of every single day for the past 35 years. Eventually, you're going to have enough data. Regardless, the nations that immediately border Israel that would be able to carry out the land invasion are all comprador governments that are more interested in oppressing their own people than invading Israel in any capacity. So they're really not a threat. That's why they've been helping Israel in its defense, which is the silliest thing. Moreover, when it comes to these sort of, let's say, military attacks against Israel or military attacks emerging from Israel, the reason that a military defeat of Israel is less likely is because, of course, as mentioned, any successful like military campaign usually involves boots on the ground. You can't get boots on the ground in Israel, and the rocket barrages that come out of Israel or that strike Israel, particularly by all competent involved forces, have limitations, right? You can destroy infrastructure, you can destroy military positions, but at the end of the day, anything worthwhile, including all the highest value targets, all the most important military infrastructure and whatnot, any major or like the absolute most important economic size or reserve infrastructure of oil and food and all that kind of stuff are underground where they can't be reached. Both in Iran, much more so in Iran, but also in Israel. Of course, also some military positions. The reason that it's not worthwhile is because the best quote-unquote bunker buster bombs, the bombs that are made so that they can penetrate as deeply as possible, that the Americans have, which are the ones that they're the only nation that have seen extensive usage of this kind of warfare, can penetrate like 30, 40, maybe 50 meters deep, which is still deep, but the deepest structures that, for example, exist in Iran are many, many, many more tens of meters deeper, right? And sometimes they're also heavily fortified positions that are also deeply underground. Yemen, for example, has deeply underground military and missile infrastructure that the Americans have been hitting relentlessly, and they have not even scratched them. That's because they're built into these rugged mountains. You can't get in there. The only way you could is through repeated, specially formed nuclear strikes, which would be diplomatic and even to an extent military chaos to bring into the fray. Also, assassinations, you got to think about that. They're very rules of engagement based. Israel lives by assassinations. They live and breathe assassinations. That's all they know how to do. Iran doesn't do them at all, which I find silly, but whatever, fine. I mean, at this point,
I guess
right? Like, there clearly is no rules, but whatever. Yeah. I understand why they are the way they are, but still. And this kind of also reduces the likelihood of military defeat. Every force that has faced Israel has been very averse to it, not because of them not being able to. It's a lot of like, I don't want to call it moral posturing. There is like, there isn't a clear concept within the Islamic ethics of war that you're not supposed to carry out assassinations, but when your enemy is so immoral and so, like, I don't know, I understand.
Yeah, trying to take
like
the high road in a situation like that while these people just constantly murk your guys, like
It's like one of the things I've never understood. Also, like the Palestinian resistance factions, whenever they smoke Israelis in Gaza, of course they call in 6,000 fucking reinforcements, and then the helicopters, the medical helicopters come, and each helicopter has like a dozen guys on it, and then they go and land where there's an ambulance with several other again, like military targets, and they always refuse to, and they show videos of them where it's clearly within range, and they choose not to, and they've said as much as because these are injured people, and according to our ethics of war, we don't attack people who are injured and so on and so forth, who are outside of the field of battle. These are no longer combatants; they're people who count as the injured.
Moral, like on a moral stance, like respect. That's
incredible, but like,
but also,
why are you not bringing down every single fucking helicopter? Like, sure, the every time you launch a missile or a rocket, and Israel has to scramble interceptors, and each interceptor costs like fucking $10 million or whatever, and they fire 4 a batch. Sure, you're causing them significant economic strain, or causing the United States significant economic strain. But these helicopters are like 50 to 100 million, if not more, dollar targets. I'm just thinking like the economies of scale in warfare, but I'm not. They have their reasoning, so why not?
Yeah.
Moving on though. Another reason why likely the military defeat of Israel isn't the least likely scenario. It doesn't mean that's impossible. It's the least likely scenario here. Is that the U.S. has heavily invested in their little colony, in its aircraft carrier, as they've called it. So much so that they have even included it in the Brookings Institute analysis paper titled "Which Path to Persia," which was published in 2009. And they even have a chapter in it that I would like to read a segment from. And the chapter is called "Leave It to Bibi."
Come on.
Exactly right. It's
non-American listeners, reference to the old show "Leave It to Beaver."
Yeah, and Bibi means Netanyahu is who they mean. By the way, this is a paper, specifically the Path to Persia, is about how they can get geostrategic and American foreign policy interests fulfilled regarding Iran. And the various ways they can do it, and if it's all the way from war and invasion to diplomatic isolation and sanctions to internal strife and supporting these terrorist movements within Iran, so on and so forth. And Leave It to Bibi is the subchapter or subheading is allowing or encouraging an Israeli military strike. And there's a segment here that I want to read for you. In short, there is considerable reason to believe that under the right or wrong set of circumstances, Israel would launch an attack, principally airstrikes, but possibly backed by special forces operations, to destroy Iran's nuclear program. This could create either an opportunity for or a threat to American interests with regards to Iran and the broader Middle East. It could constitute an opportunity, and thus a possible policy option, if the United States would like to see Iran's nuclear program destroyed, but prefers not to do it itself. They fucking write it out for you. It could be a threat if the United States believes that an Israeli attack would destabilize the region, blah, blah, blah. And then they just basically specify that the goal would be, in that case, to support Israeli action in this case, right? The United States would encourage and perhaps even assist the Israelis in conducting the strikes themselves, in the expectation that both international criticism and Iranian retaliation would be deflected away from the United States and onto Israel, is what they specifically say.
Wow. Well, they're not shy about saying it.
Yeah. And by the way, you should read the entire thing. Everything that's ever happened regarding Iran is in this fucking paper. They leave it out in the open. They don't feel they need to hide it.
Yeah.
Regardless, the U.S. wouldn't allow its vassal to fall because of the loss of the important geostrategic value for the area for the United States. And also AIPAC is the domestic hand that reinforces this symbiotic relationship within the U.S. Political leadership. This means that Israel doesn't have any real limitations like other countries regarding supplies. Most other countries have to think about supply lines and ammunition storage and weapon storage and production and other economic factors and whatnot. But Israel is attached at the hip with the United States, so they will bankroll everything they will ever need, right? So this just kind of leaves them free to do whatever they want in the military arena. The American taxpayer unwillingly contributes every bullet and bomb and missile, piece of armor, intelligence, so on and so forth, at great prices to themselves, of course. And unwillingly for the vast majority of Americans. Because of this, Israeli stocks really will only dry up when American weapon stocks dry up. And that can happen much quicker than expected because the United States has kind of went all in on the Ukraine thing a couple of years ago and then sent way too much of their reserves in, just like Germany and a bunch of these other countries did. And as a result, they are kind of relying on running production to slowly replenish. But out of this running production, they have all these commitments to these various to Ukraine and Taiwan and Israel, and they send these weapons over to them.
This is China's long game. This is the mysteries of the Orient.
Exactly
Xi Jinping
right.
is waiting. He's watching the stocks drop, and he's gonna launch his orbital drop shock troopers into the United States. No warning whatsoever.
Yeah. Do you know something?
Arkansas has fallen.
Super soldiers have infiltrated the KFC. Thank you, USA.
You know, Xi Jinping could do the funniest thing. If the United States commits to war in Iran and then actually sends any sort of measurable amount of troops and airstrike, and they completely pivot and they move, all sorts of resources towards the Middle East, it would be the funniest fucking thing. If China's like, you know what?
Yeah.
let's just do that would be so fucking funny. It's like that what's it called? There's those two buildings in Israel. They're called the Twin Towers. I think they're in Tel Aviv. They're called the Twin Towers. I don't remember what they're for, but they're not trade buildings, and they're very stocky, tiny buildings. But it'd be hilarious. Iran could do something very funny. But anyways, what I was saying is,
we're just sitting in our room seeing a barrage of nuclear missiles slowly touch down on our cities, and we're like, damn, Xi Jinping, that shit's fucking hilarious.
That's fire, bro.
Fire when ready. Fire when ready, please.
Worth it. Like,
oh my god. But I was gonna say, Israel is the golden child over Ukraine. Resources meant for Ukraine are diverted from Ukraine to Israel, but they are not the golden child over Taiwan. Now, why is that? That's because Taiwan has a much more important role as the tripwire for American warmongering in East Asia to limit the potential growth and dominance of China as a world power. This kind of parallels the existence of West Germany at the time. When you compare Israel and West Germany in the 70s and 80s, West Germany was the golden child, not Israel. And that's because West Germany was the front line in the potential future conflict that could have occurred with the Soviet Union. Right. So this is kind of like pushing back on... There's some people who seem to think that Israel completely owns the United States, and whatever they say will happen. Yeah, no, there are red lines eventually. They're just very, very far. And the reason that they're very, very far is because the vast majority of the American political class is in the pockets of, or vice versa, I don't remember the American saying. You know what I mean? Yes. AIPAC has bought them out. That's why they're like this. But there are various forces at play within the American ruling class, and there are ones who understand that at a certain point, the interests of the American nation, right, supersede those of Israel. And so far, Israel has not in any way affected American hegemony. In fact, it's actually kind of aided it. But if it were to happen in a case where they would be diverting resources away from potential fight in Taiwan, then we'll very quickly see Israel take the back seat, as they did in various other points in their history.
At which point Israel would probably like chill for a little bit and try not to start a regional war, because they know they would immediately get smacked. That's entirely dependent on the United States continuing to send those weapons.
And after the October 7th, they ran out of their first set of basically everything they could possibly drop on Gaza. They ran out of, I think, in 2 weeks, something like that. And then afterwards, since then, by the way, since 2023, the United States has been flying in weekly sorties of all sorts of ammunition and bombs and everything you might need, including replacement parts for all the planes, everything.
Iron Dome stuff.
Every single thing. If the United States were to say no tomorrow, the Israeli military capacity would grind to a halt. And that's why after Trump had a few statements, very lukewarm statements about maybe not supporting Israel as much, the entire Israeli political class came out saying, we need an indigenous Israeli weapons industry, blah, blah, blah. We need to make everything here. Yeah. I'm like, you, all fucking 6-7 million of you, and no...
There's literally 30 dudes there!
Yeah. My God. Anyways, but...
the U.S., by the way, as we're speaking, moved 30 jets closer to Iran. I don't think they'll strike. Do you think they'll strike?
Do you remember the
Americans, I mean.
The Millennium Challenge war game that they did in 2002? And the result was the Americans getting absolutely annihilated. So badly that they're like, oh no, it's cheating. It's asymmetrical warfare.
Yeah, bro, we lose all the war games these days. It's really funny.
Yeah. I'm kind of rooting the game. I don't want them to attack Iran. Of course, it's going to heavily destabilize the region. Yeah. But like the role that Iraq played in bringing down American unipolarity in that way the death knell into American imperialism that Iraq dealt, which was all building off of the amazing achievements of Vietnam and all these other anti-imperialist movements that occurred before us. Iran would just kind of, like, that would be the end at that point.
Yeah.
They cannot commit to any sort of... they can bomb the living hell out of it and kill lots of people, but they can't do what they did to Iraq. They can't occupy. They can't. And if they do, they're going to significantly fail.
I don't think even Trump would do that. The dude's a moron, but like he agrees with whoever he last spoke to, and in a situation like that, he would be speaking to the military leadership of the United States, and they'd be like, "Dude, don't do that, please." Like it's my job to
proxy. Yeah, you have a perfect proxy. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
That would be so stupid.
Leave it to Bibi. Exactly right. That's why they say leave it to Bibi. But anyways. And this is my final point. Notice how, despite all these things that I discussed regarding the potential military defeat of Israel being less likely, whatever, I discussed the nature of war with Israel, land or air war, limitations of rocket barrages and whatnot, what infrastructure can be accessed and what can't, U.S. investment. These are the reasons, really. If you notice, not one of my reasons is the Israeli military. They don't factor in here. The reason is because the Israeli military is, by and large, an occupation force and not a professional fighting force, the way that the United States military or Russian militaries are. The experience of the Israeli military comes entirely from, at the very best, highly besieged asymmetrical warfare where they have every advantage and they still fail to meet their goals against an enemy that has every limitation set upon them, or they police grannies in the West Bank. That is the full limit of their...
They're riot cops. Yeah. That's how they operate.
Yeah. They have never seen any real combat. They have never been able to fight without complete air and armor and weaponry superiority against and intelligence superiority. They've never been... They've never picked a fight in a way that they've been disadvantaged in, and that's because the people that they're fighting are highly disadvantaged because they're under military occupation. Regardless, also something very related is after very limited and very casualty-averse engagements in Gaza for a very relatively short amount of time, the IDF morale collapsed. The reservists, they refused to serve. Israeli society cracks, basically, because they try to forcibly conscript segments historically excluded from military service. And this is what I kind of find funny, the most basic airsoft tactics, not even military, airsoft tactics, like, for example, you don't stick your gun through a window to reveal where the fuck you are, that they fail at.
Skyline yourself,
right. Yeah. The simplest, like, it's actually kind of funny. I remember I watched one of those, like, gung-ho, this is very early on in, like, the early 2024, one of these gung-ho American Patriot military veterans, and he was reacting to footage of the war. And he would comment. He was like, "What the fuck are these IDF people doing?
Amateurs."
It's like they've never. It's like they're not trained. Essentially, is what his point was. Is like these are supposedly elite units and whatnot, and they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And that's of course very.
I appreciate chuds like that because they're like pro-Israel, but also they're not going to pull their punches when they're talking about inferior like military chuddery, which is nice because then your obnoxious uncle hears that, he's like, oh, maybe Israel's not perfect. They're idiots.
Exactly right. Exactly right. But that's by the way, they fail at that basic stuff, let alone advancing beside armor, which Israelis never do. They never leave their tanks or armored personnel carriers. They instead wait for overwhelming reinforcements to come so that they can then retreat, by the way. They don't stay so that they can they wait for people to come to help them. They make sure the area is completely clear and then they fucking pull out. Yeah. Iran, on the other hand, has had over 20 years of experience in modern asymmetrical warfare because of their official engagements, or they were embedded in unison from Lebanon to Syria to Iraq, from their militias and quote-unquote proxies to direct engagements that they had at different points. So this is a highly different scenario, and that's why, by the way, I keep emphasizing any sort of like boots on the ground action in Israel is disadvantageous to Israel and advantageous to everybody else because Israel can't put up with this. That's why they have the Samson option. That's why they have nuclear weapons in the first place, because they knew that they wouldn't be able to absorb anything. So the only thing they can end up doing is do exactly what they've done. Assassinations and just airstrikes and killing civilians and journalists and children and whatnot, attacking hospitals, the mass casualties in hopes of making the cost as high as humanly possible, in hopes of, through some barbaric reasoning, thinking that would mean that people would not would refrain from attacking.
I mean, if you've ever played a video game, like you can bomb the enemy cities all you want, but unless you can get your own units to capture places, you're not gonna win. Yeah, you're just gonna stick around. You're not going to expand. Not to be, cringe with video game analogies and stuff, but like common sense.
Yeah, exactly right. Without any sort of that's why they rely on regime change so much. That's why what happened in Syria happened. By the way, it's more complicated than just Israeli, U.S. back, blah blah. There's a big portion of that and whatnot. Same like what happened with Lebanon, and they're pushing to try to disarm Hezbollah. They do a lot of this behind the scenes stuff to make up for the fact that they know that any sort of real military engagement would result, like in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War, where before the United States came in to basically save them, they were on the brink of ceasing to exist as a nation. Whenever any nation had any sort of parity, by the way, with them, all of a sudden they crumble. Until, of course, Daddy USA, Uncle Sam comes running in to support. But yeah.
Not
JT,
forever.
do you want to take it off with your... or do you just want to take it off? I would like that as well.
You got it. You guys are... It's unfortunate for you, dear listener, that this is an audio-only episode because I'm taking off my Honduran fruit salesman's outfit right now. All right. I got the boring stuff, but also very important stuff, which is the diplomatic side of things. So I want to start quickly with Israel's behavior and why they are in the diplomatic position that they're in. I'm going to keep this fairly short because at this point, obviously, we all know what's going on. But I do want to emphasize the similarities between what Israel is currently doing and what apartheid South Africa did. Because for my money, it's going to cause very similar outcomes. Israel's actions, especially its ongoing occupation of the West Bank, its blockade of Gaza, genocidal military campaigns, and the illegal expansion of settlements, is increasingly leading to diplomatic isolation and international criticism, particularly in the Global South, the UN, and amongst civilian nonprofits and activist groups around the world. This behavior is quickly cementing Israel's status as a global pariah. So let me give you a quick rundown of the stuff that's getting them in hot water. First and foremost, obviously, the genocide. This has been the most widely broadcast series of atrocities in human history at this point. Despite Israel's attempts to stifle information coming out of Gaza, they've not been able to stem the tide of the most barbaric images most of us have ever seen. They have explicitly targeted hospitals, places of worship, medical personnel, civilians gathering for aid, the children, the elderly, the sick, and everyone in between. So it should not be that surprising that the vast majority of humans on Earth are opposed to this behavior. And this is the primary reason Israel's reputation has been so thoroughly tarnished, even among liberals and people generally more willing to give Israel the benefit of the doubt. It's really hard to dismiss the constant videos of dismembered children and cackling IDF soldiers celebrating their casual cruelty. The scale of destruction in Gaza, especially in recent months, has sparked completely justified accusations of war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, not only from concerned citizens of the world, but also international human rights groups and governments. Then there are the settlements. Despite international condemnation and scrutiny, Israel has continued to expand their settlements in the occupied West Bank, which are illegal under international law. The apartheid regime currently controls about 60% of the West Bank and fiercely restricts Palestinian development there. This behavior gives the lie to the claim that Israel wants to pursue a two-state solution, as their rabid expansion clearly indicates otherwise. This is another big issue for the liberals and the quote-unquote international community, who are allergic to taking a moral stance on things, but they're willing to wag fingers at violations of poorly enforced international law. When you start to lose the liberals and the bureaucrats like this, things are getting pretty bad. Now, finally, we've got Israel's blatantly discriminatory laws. Israel is not particularly subtle about their supremacist project. The 2018 nation-state law declared that only Jews have the right to national self-determination in Israel, which officially enshrines Jewish supremacy into law. It also downgraded Arabic from an official language to one with, quote, special status.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, It prioritizes new Jewish settlement as a national value, greenlighting land grabs and evictions on phony moral grounds. Meanwhile, Palestinians in Israel proper are less than second-class citizens. They face systemic discrimination in housing, land access, and public funding. Those outside the militarized fence fare even worse. Palestinians passing through the barricades, like to get to work, for example, are subjected to invasive and humiliating checks, and accusations of violence and sexual assault on the part of the Israeli checkpoint guards are common. This is especially heinous because while Palestinian refugees and their descendants are barred from returning to their homeland, even if they were expelled during the Nakba, and they can prove that, Jewish people worldwide with zero connection to the land can immigrate freely and immediately gain citizenship. And then, of course, you've got the 2003 Citizenship and Entry into Israel law, which bans Palestinians from the West Bank or Gaza from gaining citizenship through marriage, keeping the blood pure, all that. On the educational side of things, the local curriculum often omits Palestinian history and identity, reinforcing marginalization and creating a mythologized past for the next generation of brainwashed Israelis. There's a lot more we could cover, but the specifics aren't really what matter at this point. The TLDR, to me, is pretty telling. Israel maintains a tiered legal and civil system. Jewish Israelis have full rights and privileges, while Palestinians face systemic legal discrimination and worsening conditions. Occupied Palestinians live under military control with limited or no political or civil rights and constant threat to their lives and livelihoods. So, taking all this into consideration, it is pretty clear why there's a growing international consensus that Israel is practicing a form of apartheid, which is defined in international law not just as racial separation, but as the institutionalized domination of one group over another. Personally, I don't think anyone could argue that Israel is not an apartheid state at this point. It's very clear. So now let's take a look at the consequences of Israel's behavior. International backlash and growing isolation. The United Nations and international legal bodies are constantly condemning some new crime by the apartheid regime. UN bodies regularly pass resolutions condemning settlement activity and occupation. South Africa, Ireland, and others have pushed for the ICJ and the ICC to get more involved in prosecuting Israel's crimes against humanity. The fact that South Africa has been leading the charge is significant because of obvious parallels in their own history. Their involvement lends a moral authority to the proceedings, which hopefully will make a difference. We'll see. While politicians in the West have dragged their feet, particularly the U.S., which benefits tremendously from Israel's existence, these past 2 years have seen ICJ debates on whether Israeli policies constitute genocide and apartheid, which is a big step outside the norm for these bodies. There is a shift happening, even in the global north, which is it's a very, very good thing, if entirely too slow. The global south, on the other hand, has no such trouble casting their lot with decency and humanity. Many global south countries, including Brazil, Bolivia, South Africa, Indonesia, Colombia, Malaysia, Namibia, Venezuela, and many others have been increasingly outspoken in condemning Israeli policies. They also openly use the terms apartheid and genocide, which goes a long way towards showing normal people that, yes, the world outside the United States recognizes what's happening, even as Israel's allies continue to lie about it. South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the ICJ is another significant milestone, reminding the world of its own historical experience and offering a stark diplomatic rebuke. I will let Ugopnik talk more about the sanctions and BDS side of things in a minute, but that's another element of international isolation. A number of universities, trade unions, artists, even some states have cut ties with Israel, with more threatening the possibility. But the moment of truth is still yet to come. The United States and the EU have long been Israel's staunchest allies, and while their resolve is faltering, it has not collapsed just yet, as we've seen. That will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, though. If the U.S. and the EU move from just weakly criticizing specific actions by Israel or like individual people, and instead they pull funding or stop sending weapons, that will mark the beginning of the end for the apartheid project. Domestic political pressure in the West, particularly from younger, more radical Americans, is shifting attitudes among the wider population and making politicians, if not afraid, at least a little bit uncomfortable and more hesitant. The U.S. has even seen internal governmental dissent and high-profile resignations over continued support for Israel. And these cracks they're a really big deal for the United States. I mean, it's like way too little, obviously, like taking a worldly view, but the fact that there are cracks in the staunchest support Israel has ever had is a very good thing. And it's our job to widen these cracks until U.S. support for Israel finally collapses. And I've mentioned the historical parallels to South Africa a couple of times, but if you want a bullet-pointed list for your friends and family, here you go. All right. Apartheid South Africa, you've got racial segregation and Bantustans. Israel and occupied Palestinian territories, you've got legal fragmentation and a separation wall. So very similar there. South Africa, global pariah status for its behavior. Israel, increasing diplomatic isolation, especially post-2023. South Africa, UN condemnations, same with Israel. South Africa, economic and cultural boycotts. In Israel, you've got the BDS movement, academic and artistic boycotts. You've got international sanctions that apartheid South Africa faced. Israel, more or less the same thing, mounting pressure for arms embargoes and divestment. And then, of course, for both failed states, you've got global solidarity movements, especially in the global south. So it's not one-to-one. There are differences between the two projects, but the similarities are striking. Their behavior is similar enough where you can draw certain conclusions, where you can kind of track the trajectory, and see that if support for Israel falters enough in the United States, that'll be GG, and it will go the way of South Africa. South Africa's isolation was driven by a moral consensus, globally speaking, that apartheid was indefensible. Israel
Despite
is now...
the fact that the United States supported to the very last minute.
To the 11th hour, they supported it, and then suddenly, not so much. And then you couldn't find anybody who had ever supported apartheid, right? And that's what we're going to see with Israel.
Yeah, exactly right.
You've got international legal bodies examining whether its actions constitute apartheid and or genocide, with the global population already agreed on that point. The moral authority of countries like South Africa in making these claims adds weight to the comparisons. So while Israel still currently enjoys strong U.S. and some European support, it is increasingly isolated diplomatically, particularly due to its policies in Gaza and the West Bank. Because of Israel's continued behavior, they are facing legal challenges at the ICC and ICJ, cultural and academic boycotts, and most importantly, the loss of moral legitimacy among large swaths of the global population. Just as apartheid South Africa faced mounting international pressure, including sanctions and diplomatic isolation, Israel is headed towards a similar status if they don't back down. And the end result will be the complete erosion of its international support, as well as the historical loss of legitimacy and justified vilification in future history books, and the eventual collapse of the Israeli apartheid regime. So when that will become a thing, what the timeline looks like, we don't know yet. But we do see the cracks forming even among its staunchest allies, and an upswelling of support for the Palestinian cause and vilification of the apartheid regime, which is a very, very good thing.
Beautifully put. I mean, that's the whole point. Contradictions after contradictions after contradictions that swell more and more and more and more. You heard how they're swelling when it comes to their military project. You heard how they're swelling when it comes to international diplomacy and their position in, the grand game of realpolitik. And when it comes to their economy, I have a few things that I maybe wanted to share with the viewers that they might not be informed about. We already talked about the inherent contradiction of many Israeli citizens having multiple citizenship. Which allows them, not even allows them, which actively stimulates them to potentially emigrate out of the country as it destabilizes itself through its own actions further and further and further. But I just wanted to comment on JT's parallel with South Africa. I think that the case specifically for the way the so-called international community sees you and how that influences domestic policy is far more important to Israel than it was to South Africa for a very specific reason. This is basically a bottomless fucking money pit of a country that almost exclusively sustains itself on fucking loans from Big Bro, okay? And not only Big Bro, but smaller bros that are together with them. So to them, international recognition, international support, having a quote-unquote positive image is not simply that old liberal game of wanting to be respected by other countries, and if you're a respectable civil country, other countries are going to do the same to you. Democracies don't go to war with other democracies and other liberal bullshit, right? For the Israelis, it's 100% material. If there is a breaking point in the electoral body mass of most of these Western states, Obviously, that takes a lot of time, and there are other material interests in place that don't ask the electoral body of these particular countries. But still, the more pressure mounts against American support or European support for Israel, the more they literally feel it in their own pockets, in their own bullet depositories, and in their own fueling stations for their planes. So it's a very very material relation between their image and their probability for survival as a state in the current form that it finds itself in. Just wanted to make sure, to kind of add to that, because so that people, listening aren't just like, oh, but who gives a fuck if you're a bad guy, if you're the strong bad guy, you conquer, you kill, and then you're the only one left, and nobody can do shit to you. But that's the meme with Israel. In order for them to be strong, they need to be liked. But in order for them to fulfill their project as a settler colonial state, which is the complete extermination of all Palestinians, they cannot be liked. That's why we call them fucking contradictions. You don't have to have read, Capital to understand this. But that's one aspect of, the international recognition. We already mentioned the contradiction of dual citizens and just, I believe month in and month out, Israeli airports ended up being busier than ever in their history during specifically peak periods, et cetera, et cetera. So that immigration question, I think everybody's already pretty informed on. But what's more interesting is brain drain, right? In my modest opinion. So the tech industry, which amounts for nearly 20% of Israel's GDP and over half of its exports, over 50% of its exports, is now facing a very serious talent exodus, raising concerns about long-term economic stability. The guys flying out, by out I mean out of the country the most, are the ones in the reserve military, because they have to choose between bludgeoning people to death versus developing themselves in their industry, writing some code for some porn site or something. So a lot of them leave, right? Literally, almost all of them leave. There is direct financial incentive, not like some allegorical one, but direct financial incentive that capitalism gives these dudes to basically not go into Gaza or into the West Bank, because if they do, they're not going to make that big dollar sign from being a coder and so on. Some employees and executives have already relocated to everywhere from Europe, the US, Dubai, to so on and so on, to maintain business operations and their own salaries. Startups are struggling to secure funding, leading to layoffs and reduced opportunities, making overseas markets even more attractive than they were before. Countries like the US, Germany, and Portugal are actively recruiting Israeli tech talent with special visas, tax incentives, and higher salaries as well. We all know the pattern here. War is not good for business, especially in tech, and especially when you are a settler colony. So half of their export is tech. Tech pays well. Why the fuck would I spend 6 months, even if I hate Palestinians? What was it, 87% chance I do? I don't want to be losing money, I might be a evil demon guy, but I still want to make my my salary and pay my mortgage or whatever the fuck. So there, another contradiction. But we can't talk about money without mentioning sanctions and, of course, foreign aid. Historically, as most of you know, Israel has enjoyed strong Western support, particularly from the U.S. However, shifting global attitudes, especially among younger generations in Europe and America, could erode this very same backing, as both JT and Hakeem mentioned. For example, most of you should have heard about BDS at this point, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Millions of people on the streets, and an ever-expanding solidarity the world has with Palestine are slowly creating a completely alternative climate to what feels like an eternity of Zionism being the mainstream perspective, at least in the good old, bad old West. And while direct sanctions are, let's be honest, not very likely anywhere in the near future, I'm talking about very large ones, right? Russia sanctions level shit, right? The longer Israel keeps taking its mask off in 4K, streamed straight into all of our fucking eyeballs, the closer a moment where it's not being literally carried by American taxpayer money. Israel's existence, at least in this form, will become fiscally impossible, right? Like a young gambling addict being cut off by his mom. Just the gambling addict kills people as well in this scenario, not just his own bank account. But so yeah, TLDR, my dear friends, the weak spots in the Israeli economy are too many. The biggest red flag on the planet, arguably, the perfect tower of cards. If one falls, it's all downhill from there. And the best part, when you're a settler colony, you can't really do anything about that. Like, this is a very low conversation, but you're a fucked up apartheid state. Most of your neighbors hate you, so you can't fucking trade with them. You have to spend 60% of your time on policing your so-called domestic enemy, and are at constant risk of having half your high-skilled labor force move because grenades are going off at every corner. It's a ticking time bomb, and as we said, it's going to snowball very fast and very hard. I always repeat, since I think three or 4 months ago, because I had never heard it before, always repeat Hakim's beautiful allegory. To start a diesel engine, it takes a fucking second, but when that motherfucker starts going, there's no fucking stopping. And when Israel's decline starts going, when that first card starts dropping, there is not going to be any fucking stopping, and it's going to be their states and their economy's fault for it, because that's how they wanted it. So prepare to eat the fruit, my friend, of your lack of toils. Fucking gambler country.
And just funnily enough, very appropriate to both what you guys said, there's a statement that's just been put out by the Israeli Minister of Transportation. I will quote, "We will not allow Israelis to travel abroad at this stage. Only those who came to visit, tourists, business visitors, or diplomats will be allowed to leave." And their official, exclusions or limitations on airlines.
Holy
they can't
shit.
take, because they know they're flooding the airport to every little. They realized, by the way, when they did the airline block, that all the wealthy Israelis immediately got on cruise ships and went to Cyprus, and they're like, okay, we need to close that down and everything else. It's hilarious. Yeah,
That's amazing.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
you're trapped in here with me.
yeah. They don't want their human shields to go abroad. That's why.
Remarkable. Truly the sign of a thriving country.
So to summarize for today, the reasons for Israel's potential fall within our lifetimes, and much sooner than that, I think, are plentiful, and each of them are more or less likely depending on what turn of events history will take. The one thing that we do know is that Israel will fall, inshallah. Whether that be through diplomatic, military, economic means, this is a settler colonial entity that is not sustainable. No matter how much the United States tries to keep it on life support, and yes, it is life support, 2 days without American support, and that entity crumbles overnight. We'll see. We'll keep following the situation, of course. We'll keep trying to bring more analysis to you guys. We would love or it is our greatest privilege and honor to have you guys as our audience, with the greatest and sloppiest thanks to our patrons, who we could not exactly right, who we could not do this without, absolutely not. So we thank you very much, especially our Habibi tiers. Please do join the Patreon. You get many fantastic perks. You get bonus episodes, exclusive episodes, discounts on merch. You get access to the Discord server, as well as, if you become a Habibi tier, access to monthly discussions that we have, voice chats and stuff like that, where we have an absolutely fantastic time. With all that being said, this has been the Deprogram. I'm Hakeem.
I'm JT.
And I'm Yugopnik. Thank you, USA. You are my best
Very
friend.
juicy.